Okay, let me share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, okay, so hello everyone. So, as you know, we gathered today to have a brief session on introduction to cinematography or videography. And this is what I plan to cover today. So this would be an introductory session on the key parameters which are needed while taking a video. So, these are the key topics that I would be covering. The first one being exposure triangle. So exposure triangle, we have three main parameters. One is aperture, the other is shutter speed, and then the ISO. And the next topic would be white balance, and then exposure compensation, and what would be the ideal exposure settings. And then we'll do a recap of whatever we have learned. So, yeah, and approximately it would take 45 minutes to cover all these topics. So, is it fine? Can we get started?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay. Hmm. So, any functioning camera has two crucial parts. One would be the camera body, and the second one would be the lens. So no matter how good our camera is, it should have a very good lens that suit our expectations or the requirement. So an example of camera body would be a Sony FX30 or FX3, etc. And a sample camera lens would be a Sony 18105 lens. So so this is how it would be. I'm starting from the very basics so that people who do not have any idea can also understand it. So in this picture, if you see, the person is holding this camera and this is the attached lens. Now the light would go through the lens and there are lens elements which are present inside the lens. So lens elements are nothing but different uh, glasses. Okay, there are n number of glasses with different refractive indices that are present and which reflect and refract the light in different directions in order to get the ideal image possible as per the settings. So that is a lens and this is a camera body. Now, in order to get a good photo or a good video, lighting is very important. Without a good lighting, we cannot get a proper video or photo. So this lighting in cinematography terms is also called as exposure. So what is this exposure? Exposure is to how much extent are we allowing the light to pass into our camera through the lens. So that parameter is called as exposure. So in order to get a good video, there are three key parameters that affect the exposure of a given frame that we are trying to shoot. And these three parameters are called as exposure triangle. Okay. Now the three parameters are, the first one is aperture, the second one is shutter speed, and the third one is ISO. Now this table is very important. Initially, when we are trying to shoot, you can keep it as a reference so that you'll understand, to what values we should configure it. So we need to alter each of these parameters to get the ideal exposure that we want for our video frame. Now, each of these parameters individually can affect the light, and at the same time, they also have a side effect. So we need to alter these three parameters to decide our ideal lighting as well as balance its side effects. Yeah, so that's the definition of it. The exposure triangle in videography is the relationship between the three key settings, aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, that control how much light reaches the camera sensor and how your video looks. Let me show you something. I'll show you what a camera sensor is. So this is so this part is called as a camera sensor. So this is an FX30 camera. So this is where you put the lens, and this square shape that you're seeing here, this is the sensor, camera sensor. So this relationship between these three decide how much light reaches the camera sensor and how our video looks. Now we'll get into each of these parameters right away. So the very first parameter is aperture. So the aperture is also called as eyeball of the camera. We can consider, it just like our eye. So eyeball of the camera. So this is how this is what aperture is. So if you look at the image, so you are seeing these blades, right? So these blades are closed, which is giving a very little opening to the lens. And if you look at this image, you're seeing it wide open, right? So this opening, which is narrow and broad, so this is called as the aperture. And the blades which are closing the lens, it's called as iris. So iris, you can consider it as human iris only. So when the iris is closed down, it allows very little amount of light because the aperture is very, very small. And when you open up the iris, it makes the hole very big so that the aperture is more. Now you can have a look at this. So when the aperture is more, you'll see that the hole that's in the middle, which is aperture, is less. So as you open up the blades, the aperture is more. So what's the definition of aperture? Aperture is the component that defines the amount of first light entering the camera, and it controls how wide the lens opening is. So why do we call it as first light entering the camera? Is because when you look at the lens. So here in the middle of the camera, we have the sensor, and in the middle we have our focal point, and in the very beginning, we is the opening of the lens. So of course, the light has to enter through a lens, and the very first component that receives the lighting is the aperture. So hence we call it as aperture being the component that defines the amount of very first light that enters your camera. Now there is a ring that is present. So if you look at this person, right? Let me go back. So if you look here, there is this lens, this ring that we are seeing, right? So this ring controls the aperture. Few lenses support that, few lenses won't support that. But when we are trying to adjust the aperture, we can use one of these rings, and we can change the aperture. So when we move that ring physically, these blades move inside and they close it. And when you move the ring out, the blades open up, right? So when you move the ring corresponding to the aperture in the lens, the mechanism physically moves the aperture blades to control the size. So if the iris is closed down, it has less aperture. If the iris is opened up, it has more aperture. And any doubt still here? Is the pace okay?
Yeah, it's okay, Ramakan, from my side. Yeah.
Okay. So this aperture is measured in something called as f-stops. For example, f by 1.4, f by 2.8, f by 4, f by 8, etc. So sometimes we remove this by and we just call it as f1.4, f1, f2.8, etc. But technically it is f by 1.4. So this aperture is measured in f-stops, and it is denoted as f by n, where so f by n. So here n is 1.4 and here n is 2.8, etc. So now what is this n? So n is focal length divided by aperture diameter. So first I'll tell what aperture diameter is. So if you look at this opening, let's take example of f by 2. Now this can somewhat be considered as a circle. So if you take this opening as a circle, this circle would have a diameter, right? Which would be 2 times the radius. So that is called as the aperture diameter. And the first one, f, focal length. So I'll tell you what focal length is. So let us take example of this camera. So we have our body here, and in the middle of the body you have the sensor, and then you have your lens here, and in the middle of lens you have the optical center of the lens. So in the middle there is a key glass that's called as in the optical center. So as the distance between this optical center, the center of the lens till the sensor. So optical center of the lens till the sensor of the camera body is called as a focal length. Now, so that's the definition of it. It's measured in millimeters. The longer the focal length, the physically longer the lens is going to be. So there are lenses which let me show you that 600. See, so this is example of a 600 lens. So this is how it's going to be. Very big, right? Now let's take example of an 18105 lens. So this is how it's going to be. A very small lens, handy lens. So if a lens can support more focal length, the length is going to be very big. And of course, the weight is also going to be very heavy. So the earlier 600 one that we saw, it's about 3 to 4 kilos. And this one is very less. It comes at maybe around 400 grams or something, or less, 400 to 500 grams.
Ramakant, is it necessary to fix a length? Can't we work without lens?
Ah, no, it's impossible. It's like closing the eyes of a camera. So without a lens, the body itself is incapable of seeing anything. And these
Okay.
lenses are also quite costly actually.
So with just body, we can't take photos or videos.
No, it is useless. Without a lens, camera is useless.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So, uh, right. So this is the definition of a focal length. Now, how is this important to us, right? Now, what does this focal length do to us? So, in very simple words, if your focal length is more, you will be able to shoot long distances. If your focal length is less, you will shoot, very small distance images like macro photography, etc. Okay, so that is about focal length. Now, why did we discuss this, right? So, in this definition of aperture, so this n parameter is focal length by aperture diameter. So this is the focal length, and if you divide it with the aperture diameter, you will get the value of n. So this f1 by 4, 2.848, these are values of that specific n here. Now this value is extremely important. So all the lenses that we purchase or that are being used heavily depend on this number. So for that reason, I clarified this concept. So we are discussing about the aperture, right? Now this iris diameter, okay, this aperture is also called as the iris diameter. So this changes as per f-stop number change. So as and when this f number changes, obviously the diameter or the aperture also changes. So now we'll see how this aperture affects our exposure. So if you have a low f number, that is, here we are seeing f1.4, right? So this is quite low f number. So low f number means it has more aperture. That is, it has a big hole. For that reason, more light is going to enter into the lens. If you have a high f number, something like this, then the aperture is less. That is, you'll have a small hole. So less light enters the lens. Okay. So that's how this aperture works. So there are two key effects of aperture. One is the exposure, which we discussed, and the next one is depth of field, which is extremely important. So we'll just
Just 1 second, Ramakant, one question. Now, more light means face will be more brighter, and less light means face will be dark. Is it like that?
exactly that's like that only. Of course, it depends on the environment also for if you're shooting in the morning or if you're shooting in the night. But what you told is correct. If the hole is big and when I say more light, I mean that the images are going to be brighter, more light. And when I say less light, of course, the images are going to get darker. So
And can we say that the low aperture, low number one will be more costly and high number one will be cheaper in cost?
That is exactly correct. The low
Okay.
aperture are very costly, and the ones which give you higher numbers are very cheap.
Okay.
And that is not even because of the exposure. It's actually
Oh.
because of the depth of field. So now I will tell you what you told is correct. I'll give the reason for why it is like that also. So let me quickly, brief on the how aperture affects the exposure. So if the aperture is more, then more light is going to enter, which means the scene is going to be bright. And if the aperture is less, then you're going to get less exposure. So the images are going to be dark. So this is an example how it's going to look, right? So this is a bright image. Okay, so if you increase the aperture, so this is how the scene is going to look. It's going to look very bright. You cannot even see anything. Now, if your aperture is low, it's going to look this dark. It doesn't look good in this case as well. So we need to balance the aperture properly. But ideally, we should always put the aperture at the maximum possible level. That is, you should always allow the aperture to get maximum amount of light, and I'll tell you why now. So the very key parameter uh, which affects the aperture is depth of field. Now I'll tell you what depth of field is. Depth of field is the distance between the closest and farthest objects in our scene. Now, what do I mean by that? So let's say that, let's take this guy. Where is this fellow? So now, if you look at this, he's standing, very closer to the camera. He's the first object that's encountered by the camera, and behind him, you're seeing all these trees, grass, etc. So the depth of field is the distance between this guy who's standing here and this tree that's behind him, or matter of fact, the farthest object that can possibly be behind him. So the distance between these two objects, the first object and the last object, as detected by the camera, is depth of field. Now, how is this relevant to aperture? When you have lower aperture, it automatically blurs out the background. We call this as bokeh effect. So you get this natural blurry effect, right? Now, when we use our Zoom meetings and all, we select this filter to blur the background. So that is artificial blur. But this blur that we get when we have lower aperture is the most perfect and natural blur, and it looks very cinematic also. Unlike the digital blurring solutions, if you move this way or that way, the blurring gets disturbed and it looks very ugly in digital zooms, in digital blurring. But this aperture, right, it has this excellent quality of understanding which object hits the your camera first and which objects hit it later. Okay, so that's how the lighting system works. Now, using that, it understands that okay, this person is my main object. So I just blur everything out. So it works same like our eyes. If you are trying to focus on one specific object that's before you, automatically everything else behind it gets blurred out, right? If you had noticed. So that is the behavior of our eye, and this also is extremely similar to that. So we should always choose lower aperture lenses so that you get a very good cinematic and natural blur. So that is depth of field. Now I'll just brief upon this again. So if you have more aperture, then your depth of field is going to be shallow. So like this, depth of field is shallow. So you'll get a blurry background, which looks very good and very cinematic. And then if the aperture is less, then the depth of field is very deep. That is, the frame will be in focus. The entire frame will be in focus. Of course, now there is also a concept of autofocus, and there are different modes of autofocus and how there are manual focus, etc., etc. So we'll cover them in next session. But just specific to our session that we are discussing, more aperture means you'll get a blurry background which is very cinematic. Less aperture means the entire frame will be in focus and you won't get any blurry background. So this is an illustration of how this works. So you can consider this dot of light. There are two dots of light, right? So you can consider these dots of light as an object. You can consider this light as this guy who is standing here. Now, this guy's image is in the form of light is going to enter into the lens. So in the first case, if you notice, the aperture is more. So more light can enter into the lens, and this is the light sensor or the retina, we call it as. So here it forms the image in a with a narrow depth of field because more light is entering. It can definitely classify between which is the nearest object and which is the farthest object. Whereas if you put the aperture as low light enters into it, so it's hard for lens to make that differentiation. So it simply allows whatever light is entering into it without any effects. Now I'll summarize this aperture concept. So let's take example of an f1.8. Okay. Now f1.8 is going to be very bright, and of course it enters a lot of light. And if we talk specifically about exposure, then of course f1.8 is not a good idea. uh, and how it affects the depth of field. It gives very beautiful blurred backgrounds. Okay, we usually use it when we take portraits and portraits, the portrait images. This is specifically about photography. Actually, portraits also mean, let's say, a speaker is speaking sitting in a chair, for example, our use case. So in that case, it blurs out the entire background. For example, we are using a blue backdrop, right? So it blurs out even that in case you are using this f1.8. This very bright light is not an issue because there are other parameters which we can fine tune and adjust the exposure. Now let's take example of f by 4, which is the lens that we are currently using. So it is bright, moderate light, which is very ideal. And it has a shallow depth of field. There will be blurring, but it won't be as great blurring as this one. It's going to be a moderate blur that you will get. If you're choosing any wildlife photographies, etc., then we can use that. And of course, even for any generic usage, f4 is good, and f8 and allows less light, and of course it would have a deep depth of field, which means a lot of the background is going to be in focus. So it's used for landscapes, architecture, real estate photographies, etc. Yeah, so that's it about aperture. I'll just give one closing line on aperture. So if the aperture number is less, more light will enter into the lens, and you will have a bright, very bright, frame. At the same time, it will naturally blur the background, making it more cinematic. So it's
One
always preferred
second.
to, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. So this number less means more aperture, or number more means more aperture?
If the number is less, it means that it has more aperture. F1.8, it number is very small. Small number means more aperture, more light. So I'll show this image here. So see, F1.4. F1.4 has more opening, so more light. F16 has a small opening, so it's going to be dark.
So that means we need to adjust the aperture in a medium range, right, Ramakant, for the room where, currently we are using this camera in processor room, right? So ఆ రూమ్ కి మీడియం అపర్చర్ పెట్టాలా లేకపోతే కన్నా అంటే ఏం సజెస్ట్ చేస్తావు రమక నువ్వు?
అన్న ఖచ్చితంగా మనం మీడియం అపర్చరే పెట్టుకోవాలి. మ్యాటర్ ఆఫ్ ఫ్యాక్ట్ మన దగ్గర F1.4 కానీ F2లు 2.8 ఏం లేవు. మన దగ్గర మనం వాడే లెన్స్ F4 లెన్స్. సో ఈ 1.8 1.4 కొనాలంటే 2 లక్షలు అవుతుంది లెన్స్ ఒకటే. సో
ఓకే,
F1.8 lens. So there are two things. You have zoom lens and you have a lens which doesn't zoom. Something like this. So you can consider this lens. This is a Sigma lens. సో దీనికి ఫోకల్ వచ్చేసరికి మనకి 28 నుంచి 45 వరకు ఉంది. ఇట్ గివ్స్ అస్ an f1.8, which is very good. It gives excellent motion blur, but it's very costly. It costs 1.118 lakhs. Just the lens will cost us so much. And if we are planning in Sony, it will cost even more. It'll go up to 2 lakhs also. Sony Grandmaster series. So something, yeah,
So
exactly.
can
This
we
is
use
what.
other company lenses for Sony body?
Yes, we can definitely use it, no doubt. It is very safe also. For example, So I spoke with few professionals. So what they told me is that I mean, what your question is, if we can use or not. Yes, we can definitely use. And coming to which ones we should use, the first preference should always be a Sony Grand Master series. So these lenses are very costly, but at the same time, their specifications are also excellent. And the second preference should be Sigma lenses. So Sigma company lenses. And the third preference can be Sigma G series, the one that we purchased. We took Sony's G series. Our lens is Sony 18105 lens. This is our lens actually. So our lens is an f4 lens, and G is the gold line. This is the what do you call it? The name of the series. OSS is optical steady shot. It gives inbuilt steady shooting, and PZ stands for power zoom. E stands for E mount. So this is the so you're seeing here, right? E mount. So it's a type of mount that is present in the lens which can mount to your camera. So it's a type of mount. So this gives us excellent zoom. It gives us 18 mm, 18 to 105 mm. This is called as a zoom lens. Now, uh, I'll show you something. Two, two, now let's look at this lens. Okay. Now this Sony E mount lens. It has a focal of 28 to 70 mm. So the lens that we are currently using has even more range. So 18 to 105. So what difference does this focal length even make? It gives you the ability to zoom. So 18 to 105, you can consider this 18 as something zoomed out, completely zoomed out, and 105 is completely zoomed in. It gives you a very wide range of zoom. So this can be used for both photography and videography, and it's used by most of the people across the industry, the beginners or people who just shoot normal content if they are not going for photographies wedding shoots etc., who have normal podcasts and all, they use this lens, and it's of course budget friendly. Whereas if you look at this Sony E mount lens, this is a full mount lens. It gives us just 28 to 70 mm. The zoom range is also very less, but it gives you the focus of 2 f2. For this reason alone, its cost is 2.61 lakhs, just because of this focal f2. Ours is an f4. So what advantage would we have here is that when we shoot with this lens, the video that we get is going to look extremely cinematic. It's going to look just like you're watching a movie, like a real movie. It's going to look like that. So it's that good actually. So this aperture is the factor that decides the cost. So Trailoki, you were asking earlier, right? If we are getting less f number, then the cost is going to be big because it affects the depth of field, which gives a natural motion blurry scene. So that is
So
all
here
about aperture.
F2 means F by 2.
F2 means f by 2, correct.
Okay.
So usually they do not put a by here, but it's actually a by f by 2, f by 1.4, etc. So the denotion, right, how aperture is measured. So it is f by
Correct.
whatever. So f is just the letter. So f doesn't have any physical value. F is not a focal length actually. The focal length by aperture is this value, but this f itself is a constant. So they always remove this dash and they just tell f 2.8, f4, etc.
F by
So
16,
any
how much does it cost?
f by 16. Um, Let me see. No, it's like this actually. If you have f by 4 lens, you also have f16 because this is an f stop. So I'll tell you that concept. So each of these is a stop. So f1.4 is a first stop. So if you have f1.4 lens, inside your lens, you can adjust the aperture and the next stop is f2. Then you have 2.8. Then you have 4, 5.6, 8, 11, 16. Okay. So now, why I'm telling this is you asked if how much f by 16 costs. So we don't have f/16 lenses. So you have up to f5.6, which you can buy. If you buy f1.4, you can adjust the aperture to make it f5 5.6. You can adjust it further to make it 8, 11, and 16. So if you go beyond f/4, right, the lens will not. There is no point of buying such lenses because it doesn't give you any motion blur.
So
And the
f1.4 will be more costlier than f2.
definitely it will be more costly.
Got it. Got
And
it.
there are two types of lens. One is a zoom lens and the other is a prime lens. So now let us look at this lens. So it has a variable focus, right? Variable focal. So it has 28 to 70 mm and it's an f2, right? Now I'll show you something else. So f2, I'll show you prime lens. Now look at this. Now let us take something else. So let's take Sony only. So in Sony, so this is an f/2 lens, right? And this is also an f/2 lens. Now, why is that? This is coming for only 30,000 rupees, whereas this is coming for 2.6 rupees, 2.6 lakhs, because this has a zoom, 28 to 70 zoom, and this is called as a zoom lens. This is a prime lens. Prime lens has only one single, focal. You cannot zoom it in. Whatever zoom it has inbuilt, it will be like that only. You cannot zoom in, you cannot zoom out, etc. If you want to zoom in, you have to take your camera and put it in front of the speaker. That is the only option.
So
So
whenever we
what
do the
else?
zooming, we have to move around far and
You have you have to move the camera itself. You
okay.
cannot zoom with this lens, but it gives a very good motion blur. I mean, the background blur is going to look very good. So in case in future we want to buy any lens, right? We can plan for a prime lens, but how we should plan it is that so this using you should measure the ideal distance between the camera and Swami, and you'll get distance in meters, right? So you need to
Mm.
convert it into the focal length. How and you can buy a lens which gives that exact same length, so that you will achieve this
Okay.
f2 as well. So earlier I
You
told that
told that f2 means very cinematic, right? What do you
correct.
mean by saying cinematic and non-cinematic?
So cinematic, I'll show you. Let's take this. So cinematic means this background, right? This is getting blurred if you see. So this blurring is called as depth of field. So if for an
Yes.
f1.6, you do not have any background blurring. It's just like how you shoot normally. So with an excellent aperture, you will get this natural blurry effect. That is the depth of field. So in order to achieve this, you need to buy a better lens which gives you a very good focus.
Wait. Now you said very good lens, which means the aperture number 1.4 or FF something. Now,
Both of these together come under lens, both the focal
oh,
length and the aperture. Both of these combined together form a lens.
focal length and aperture. So if
Aperture.
we take aperture alone,
Huh,
then we have two options, whether we can have a variable focal length or a static focal length. Static
correct.
focal length, we go for prime lens, and a
Huh,
variable focal length for zoom in and zoom out without moving the camera. We need to go for this FE,
zoom lens. Huh,
zoom lens. Okay.
no, zoom lens. So E mount is just the type of this mount. So you are going to fix the lens to camera, right? So
Oh,
it's a technical term used. It's the mechanism which is used to lock the lens to camera. So it has nothing to do with our shooting. So it's just the type that is built by Sony. That's it.
so where is
So
this
there are
written as zoom lens here? E mount, FE, GM. There's nothing
if
called
if
zoom.
yeah. So if you have variable focal, it's a zoom lens.
Okay.
Hmm. Because focal is different, which means that this focal itself is nothing but zooming. You can zoom from 28 till 70 And here also prime is not written. It won't be written. If it has a static, focal length, it means that it is called as a prime lens. So this is a prime
Okay.
lens, and this is a zoom lens. So, so one important note here is that throughout this zoom range, 28 to 70, you can maintain the fixed focal of f2. So for that reason, it is more costly. It is very easy to, I mean, technically, if you have a fixed focal, right, it makes the design very easy. The person is not going to change the zoom. So they will do few modifications in length in the glass elements which are present in the lens, and they make it, you know, they can make it in less cost. But if you want a zoom and you want this both, they have to embed lots of glass elements in order to facilitate the variable zoom along with the best aperture. For that reason, it's costly.
Okay, got it. Thank you,
Okay.
Ramakant.
Okay. So are we good with the aperture? We can, if yes, we can go to the next concept.
Okay, just to my confirmation. So left side f1.4 is more aperture, f16
Huh.
is less aperture.
Uh, See, not more in lens, less, but okay, you're talking about the number or you're talking about aperture value?
Uh, I'm talking about the light in.
Okay, light in. Yeah, so this, see, now that's a good question, right? So if you look at these both, I told you earlier that f1.4 gives you more light and f16 gives you less light, but there is no
Yes.
trace of difference between these both images. That is because uh, in the second image and also first image, we have altered all the other parameters to make the video look as natural as possible. So this is just one of the parameters which affected this. So if you consider aperture individually, you are going to get a very bright scene, something like this. But we altered very other parameters, which is making it look like this. So your first question, right? So here is the aperture more or is the aperture less?
Mm.
So here the aperture is more. You have more aperture here. The value is less, but the aperture is more.
Can you just write over there below that image or above that image?
Okay, I'll write it here. Put it here. Aperture less f value. I'll put it like this. More aperture means less f value.
Right.
So now we'll get to this second concept, the shutter speed. Now, first of all, what is a shutter? And then we'll discuss what is a shutter speed. So shutter is a component in the lens that comes between the iris or eyelids, that is the aperture, and the retina, which is camera sensor. It's a curtain that opens and closes in front of sensor. So we'll look at this in image. So, now we'll take a look at this camera. So if it's just a body, it doesn't have any lens. So this shutter, so if you look at the first image, the shutter is open. In the second image, the shutter is closed. So you can consider this shutter as just like a normal shutter that is present for shops. So the general shops that we have, they have this, they open and close the shutter, right? So it's exactly the same concept. So a shutter opens and a shutter closes. So why is this needed? We'll discuss that. But I hope you can understand what a shutter is. So it's like a curtain. So a curtain which falls on the sensor and it opens up. So now where does this come in the middle, right? So the first light that enters into the your camera is the aperture. So very initially the light enters it. You control the light there, and before it enters into the camera, this curtain comes into picture. Okay. Now this is called as a mechanical shutter, which is a physical shutter. So if you're taking a photograph, uh, using your camera, then the mechanical shutter, it closes and opens. So whenever you click a picture, you see this kitchik sound, right? So that kitchik sound is due to this shutter. The shutter closes and opens. Now in video mode, of course, a video is nothing but a continuous shot of images. Now, if that is the case, when you shoot a video, you should continuously hear that kitchik 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 sound, right? But you will never hear that. Now, why is that the case? Because it doesn't use a mechanical shutter; it rather uses an electronic shutter, wherein the parts would not move, but the no, it's just electronic which is present in. It's silent and it does the job. So this is the physical uh, shutter, and the electronic shutter is just a digital component that would be present inside. Now again, how does this shutter affect our frame, right? So if the shutter is open for a long time, it allows more light to enter into your camera. In turn, it makes the scene very bright. If the shutter speed is slow, if the shutter speed is high, that is, it immediately closes your sensor. It immediately closes your shutters into the camera, and which makes the scene very dark. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, yes, Ramakant, you are.
Okay, I heard some notification sound. Okay, so I'll just tell this again. So if the shutter is open for a long time, which is the shutter speed is slow. Speed is slow means it stays open for a long time. So if it stays open for a long time, lots of light enters into your camera, which makes the scene bright. If the shutter speed is high, that is the shutter closes very soon, it makes very little light to enter into it, which makes the scene very dark. Okay. Now, I'll show the details, and then I'll show you the images. So shutter speed is simply how long the curtain or the shutter stays open. Now let us see what a fast shutter speed is. So a fast shutter speed can be considered as 1/1000, okay, 1/1000th second. So this shutter will stay open only for 1/1000th part of a second. It is that fast. When the shutter is closing that fast, of course, very little amount of light would enter into your camera, and that would make the scene dark. And now let's look at what a slow shutter speed is. It is 1/15 as an example. So what happens for 1/15? So of course 1/15 could be a small number. Of course there are shutter speeds of 2 seconds also. So that would be very slow. So in our case, let's say 1/10 seconds, which means the shutter speed is slow. So it is open for a lot of time, which means the scene is going to be brighter. Now there is a medium shutter, for example, 1/50th second. So this gives you very balanced exposure. It's not too dark, it's not too bright. It gives you the natural, motion. And okay, this motion blur I will cover next, but first I'll cover the exposure impact. So I hope this is clear. So if you have fast shutter speed, the shutter will close, very fastly, which will allow less light to enter into it, which makes the scene dark. If the shutter is slow, that is, it allows more. It closes slowly, so more light would have entered the camera. So the image is bright. So this is the example. A slow shutter speed has a brighter image, and a fast shutter speed has a darker image. Is it clear till here, or any doubts?
Yes, 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 Rama. Yeah.
Oh, super.
Yes,
Now,
Ramakant, clear.
okay, yeah. So as I told, every single option that we have, right? Every single setting, either aperture or whatever, it has a side effect on top of controlling the aperture. For aperture, the side effect was the depth of field, that is the background motion blur. But for shutter speed, the side effect is motion blur impact. Now I'll tell you what this is. Now take a look at the second image. So here the first one is slow shutter speed. The second one is fast shutter speed. Now I'll show you another photo before I explain what this does. So let's take a look at this fan. So if we look at the fan with our eyes, we just see it completely rotating. And when we click a picture, we'll get something like this. But if this is with slow shutter speed. If you shoot with fast shutter speed, then you will get the image very perfectly. Now, why is this happening? Right now, if while shooting a video, if I shoot, shake my hand continuously, I'll see this blur. But if I make the shutter speed as high, that is, if the value is high, then I'm going to get very clear and very smooth, hand movement instead of this blurry movement. Now, why is this happening? No, we'll discuss that now. So let's take example of fast shutter speed. Of course, the image would be darker, which can be compensated by other parameters. Now, what is the key other important parameter is it freezes the motion. Why does it freeze the motion is because when the shutter speed is 1/1000, 1/1000 means that it is extremely fast. So for that fast shutter speed, the motion would almost be static. For a slow shutter speed, 1/10, which means that how many times is it? It is 100 times more slower than this. So, so for 1/10th second, it is going to stay open, right? So during this time, the motion would have been already captured, right? For example, now let us take example of this. So this fellow is shaking his hand continuously. So for if I choose the shutter speed as 1/10, then the shutter is going to stay open for lot of time, right? So since it is open for lot of time, it is trying to capture it. At the same time, it has to be a photo, right? So I mean, the video is nothing but a collection of photos. So the photo is going to look blurred. By the time it clicks it, it has traveled. So I'll tell you even clearly. So look at this, the blurred motion starting. So from let's say at this point the motion is time is equal to 0, and this fellow has moved his hand from this point to this point. So at this point it is time 0.1. So during this time this hand has traveled. So for that reason your lens will capture every single detail that happened from this time to this time. For that reason it's going to get blurred. But then when you choose a fast shutter speed, your shutter speed is very fast, so the motion cannot happen by the time the shutter closes, so it's going to be static image. So simply put, what this does is that if you have slow shutter speed, the motion cannot be captured properly. But if you have a fast shutter speed, it exactly catches the frame for that specific instant. Now it can be explained here in an even better way. So if you have a slow shutter speed, you are going to see all these blurry fan wings. But if you have a fast shutter speed, the shutter closed very fastly. It was open for very small amount of time, and for that specific small amount of time, this fan was almost not moving only. It was so fast. For that reason, you are getting a very clear image of the frame. Now I'll uh, discuss this again. So if you have a fast shutter speed, it freezes the motion. It will be very crisp. Now if you have a slow shutter speed, that is the lens is open for a lot of time, which means that the your camera is capturing the entire motion, which is potentially making it blur, because it cannot skip out any detail that it has captured during the duration. So it would have a significant blur. So something like this, slow shutter. Fast shutter, it's instant, it's crisp. Now when do we use this? Where do we use this? So fast shutter, of course, see, regarding the use cases, we almost never consider the exposure factor. We always consider this side key factor only for any setting. So freezes the motion. Where do we use it? We use it for sports. If you're splashing water. So sports, because let's take an F1 racing, right? So these people, they travel at extremely high speeds. But then when you take a photo, how is that they are able to capture the perfect scene? It's because the shutter speed is very fast. I mean, it takes it at extremely fast time, 1/1000th second. For that reason, there is no motion captured, so you're going to get the perfect image. And medium is used for cinematic videos. All the movies, they are shot in a standard or a medium shutter speed. When do we use a slow shutter speed? Is when you want to make an intentional blur. For example, in movies we see these scenes, right? Someone is getting headache, they're feeling dizzy, then all the environment, it would be shaky and it would get blurry all of a sudden. So we use it at
Yes,
that
yes.
point. Yeah, so that is achieved by having a slow shutter speed. Uh, okay. Now,
But
any
I
doubts
believe
still here?
in our case, we will be using a fast shutter only, right, Ramakant? I mean,
Uh, we'll use a medium shutter, Anna, because if you
medium
use a
shutter.
fast, because if you use a fast shutter also, I mean, I thought about this. What happens when you use a fast shutter is when Swami moves his hands, right? So that will
Mhm.
be, captured properly. I agree with that, but our camera has, OSS, optical study shoot. So it has this inbuilt video stabilization. So Actually, it's not
Okay, so
fast or
medium.
slow. I'm about to get to what value we should set it. So there is a big rule which is there, 180-degree shutter rule. We are supposed to follow it. I'll tell you what value we should use. Now this fast or slow is very generic, right? Now,
Oh,
what do we make out of it? We should know exactly what value I have to put when shooting Swami. So now
correct.
I'll tell you what value we should put. So before I tell that, we should understand another concept, which is frames per second. So as I told, if you have a video which is shot for 1 second, in that 1 second, how many images are present? Video is nothing but compilation of images, right? One image is called as one frame. So in 24 FPS, you have 24 images which are combined together, which form the footage of 1 second. In 30 FPS, similarly, 30 images form a second, 60 images form a second, and 60 FPS. Now we may think that using a 60 FPS will give more detail, but at the same time, it will make our video look unnatural. So usually, one standard that is followed throughout the cine industry, no matter where, is they always use 24 frames per second. This is the standard, frame rate used because they actually experimented with every single frame rate that is present. But this 24 FPS, it gives the very very natural, video play. So we are definitely going and choosing 24 FPS only. Now, okay, now the frames per second is clear. Now, what value should be chosen for this shutter? So there is 180-degree shutter rule which has been devised in cinematography. So the 180-degree shutter rule is a fundamental cinematography principle that establishes relationship between your shutter speed and the frame rate. So FPS and shutter speed always go hand in hand. I'll tell you why in a minute. So in order to achieve the motion rendering that the human brain perceives as natural and organic. So the way human beings look at a video is different from how animals look at it, right? So, and of course, how insects look at it. So it's different for different species. So we are habituated to look at, our environment in 24 frames per second. So it's always 24 frames for us. It looks natural to us actually. So our brain perceives 24 frames as natural. Now, okay, that's fine. Now, what is this 180-degree shutter rule? So this rule is, grounded in physics of motion capture. So this 180-degree shutter rule provides motion to frame exposure ratio of 1.2, which means that the sensor is exposed for exactly half the duration of each frame's display time. So you have these 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, etc. Right? So how is shutter speed in any way linked to these frames per second? So your shutter speed decides how much light should enter into your camera, right? So if it is deciding that, it is also deciding how much light has to be given for each of the frame that is being recorded in a second, correct? So for that reason, both shutter and FPS are linked with each other. Okay, so what does this rule say? So it says that your shutter speed should always be equal to 1 divided by 2 times your frame rate. So we all know that we cannot compromise on the frames per second. It should always be 24 frames per second only in order to get a very neat video, very quality video, cinematic video. It has to be 24 frames per second. There is no other choice. So for 24 frames per second, the shutter speed is also constant. It is 1 by 2 times what is frame rate? It is 24 FPS, right? So 24 into 2, 48. So for 24 FPS, the shutter speed has to be 1 by 48. You can approximately make it 1 by 50 because in cameras we do not have, sometimes we do not, in few modes we don't have these numbers. We only have multiples of 10. So 1 by 48 to 1 by 50 is fine for 24 FPS. So we should always put the shutter speed at 1 by 50 only. And the FPS is at always 24 only. So for natural shootings, this 24 FPS gives the most natural motion. And if you are shooting in slow motion, you can increase the frames per second. Why we are even increasing the frames per second in slow motion is because if there are, what you're doing in slow motion is that you're slowing down the entire video. If you have 60 or 120 FPS, you are potentially, when you slow down the video, you are potentially bringing it down to again 24 frames per second, which will make the video even more cinematic again. So for normal shoots, for our use case, we should always put FPS at 24 and we should put the shutter speed at 48 or 50. So is it clear till here regarding
So Ramakant, if
this?
we fix the shutter speed as 1/50, does the frame rate automatically come to 1/24?
No, it doesn't. Both are completely different. So for
Okay.
example, you can put your FPS as 24 and you can put your shutter speed as 1/2, 120 or 1/180 also. It's not a mandatory rule. Your camera allows it. Your camera allows them to be operated independently. Actually, they are independent. You should manually wire them to 24 FPS and 1/50 shutter speed so that your video looks natural. Did that answer your question, Trilakya?
Yes, Ramakant. So two things are different, but we have to calculate those numbers and fix the numbers accordingly. 24 frames and 1/50
Shutter.
as a shutter
Mm.
speed.
If possible, you should fix it at 1/48 only. It will look even more good. But if not, if
Okay.
this is not available, you can put 1/50. There is no much difference. The difference would be extremely minor. You cannot even notice it. But yeah, that
Okay.
is the bottom line. So I'll just tell again. So in shutter speed, if the shutter speed is fast, which means that it will be open for very less amount of time. So less light enters into the camera. So the image is going to be dark. And since the shutter is open for very less amount of time, it's going to get the crisp, capture of the environment. If the shutter speed is slow, which means it shutter stays open for a long time and it enters more light to enter into it. So the image is going to be bright. At the same time, since the shutter is open for a long time, lot of motion might have happened while the camera is capturing the video. For that reason, video or the photo, for that reason, it would result in a blur, something like this, the left one, and something like this. And of course, we should always choose the 180 degree rule. You should always put the FPS at 24. And of course, you should always put the shutter speed at 1/2 times it, which is 1/50. So that sums up the shutter speed. Are there any doubts? If not, I'll move on to next parameter.
I'm good, Ramakant.
Great.
Yeah,
So the very
actually, one
next,
small request, uh,
Anna.
Ramakan. Maybe I believe if we, I mean, for today, if we stop over here, so that I can revisit all the topics which you said, so that
Anna,
if I get queries
I-
tomorrow, we can ask
uh,
again.
okay. So this is the last concept, Anna. We
Okay,
can break after this because it won't be complete if I stop here. So
okay,
I'll
okay.
try to complete this very fast. So we'll stop at
No,
this
it's
ISO.
okay. Sure, sure.
Yeah, yeah. So ISO is called as, so the third parameter is ISO, which is fake light. So why do we call this fake light? Is because ISO is something that is introduced digitally by the camera. So we control the lighting which is present in our environment, either naturally, if you are shooting outdoors, or if you are shooting indoors, we have our studio lights. But if you think that this lighting is not enough, you can digitally add more light. For example, in post processing, we enhance the brightness, right? So you can consider this something of that sort. It is a fake light introduced by the camera to make the scenes bright. So ISO is camera's gain control. It electronically amplifies the signal captured by the sensor after the light has been recorded. So camera body has a sensor, right? So this captures the signals. Signal is nothing but the light or the image that's being captured by the lens. Now, when that enters into the camera, the moment it hits the camera, you can, so this ISO comes into picture after it hits the sensor. So aperture comes at the very beginning, and then comes the shutter speed in between the lens and the camera body sensor. ISO comes after the light has hit the sensor. And at this point, you can digitally increase the value of ISO. It will make the scene brighter. And if you decrease the ISO, it will make the scene darker. So it is as simple as that. So if you have low ISO, that is ISO value at 125 or 160, you'll get a darker image. If you have very high ISO, like high ISO, like 32,000, 64,000, it can go up to 1 lakh or 2 lakhs also. You'll have very bright image. Okay. Now, if you have more ISO, more light will enter into it. Now, what is the downside of it? I told that it always has a side effect. The side effect is quality of the image. So if when you choose low ISO, you will get the cleanest signal possible. It will not have any noise. But if you choose high ISO, the image may be bright, but it will add unnecessary noise. So what do I mean by noise is something like this. So in old TVs, we used to see black and white dots, right? If the channel is not coming, you see this unwanted noise, giz, the sound used to come with black and white dots. So that is called as grain. So when you choose high ISO, this disturbance would be added. This the disturbance is also called as gain or grain. It's called both ways. So that will be added. So you are losing quality of your image if you increase the ISO. So using high ISO will create unwanted noise in the picture. So the ideal practice is always to put your ISO at the lowest possible level. So again, what is the low possible level? So our cameras have something called as a native ISO. Native ISO is nothing but the lowest possible ISO which can be added into the scene. So you can simply select native ISO option and it will either choose 125 or it will choose 800. Our camera supports both. So depending on the amount of brightness that you need, you can set it one among these both. So it's better to keep it as low as possible. Better to keep it under not 1,000. Better to keep it under 100 if possible. So this we are almost done with this. So this ISO is also found in mobile phones. So when you try to shoot a video, right? So there is this brightness bar that comes up, and you can adjust it up and down. So this adjusting it up and down, when you adjust it up and down, it will make this scene also bright and dark. So this concept is called as ISO. It is a digital light. Now, what are the practical implementations of this? Before I tell that, I'll just summarize it again. So if you put more ISO, the scene will be bright, but at the same time, it will make the frame very grainy or noisy. It will add these dots to it, which will make our frame look bad. So more noise will be there. Now, what are practical implementations? So we are almost done with it. So what are practical implications
One
of
small
this?
question,
Anna,
Ramakan, from my side.
Anna,
So yeah, actually, yeah, shutter. I understood that it uses to control the blurring thing. But when coming to the aperture and ISO, I mean, could you just, quickly let me know what exact aperture, what I understand from what you said is, uh, it is like to handle the light thing, right? Brightness. It is also little, similar to the ISO. Could you please,
Uh,
uh, yeah,
so
correct me?
yeah, so yeah. So these three parameters: aperture, shutter speed, ISO. So as you know, each of them have can control the exposure. We'll put that aside. So we'll come to the side effects. So aperture adds a depth of field, which means it makes the background blurry. Just the background will be made blurry so that it looks cinematic. When it comes to shutter
Okay.
speed, it affects the motion blur itself. The very object you are trying to focus, that will be smoothened out. It's like stabilizing your video. So motion blur is
Oh,
can also be called as stabilizing, simply put.
okay.
So
Okay.
I didn't. I mean, depth of field is nothing but briefly, it is blurring out your background. It separates your
Mm.
subject from the background. It blurs out the background so that it looks cinematic to just look at your speaker. So that is given by aperture. Now, when it comes to shutter speed, it stabilizes the video so that the motion blur looks natural. And this ISO, it adds your noise if you shoot it up.
It adds noise in ISO. Okay.
ISO adds grain or noise.
Okay. So only ISO is related only, with regards to, noise or drain. These two things only,
Huh,
right? I mean, it's not,
huh.
okay.
So two things. We should use ISO to control our lighting also. If you want to make the scene look more bright, then you should
Mhm.
control ISO. So ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. Both of these three together decide the aperture. At the same time, you should have those values corresponding to the attributes that they provide us: the depth of field, the motion blur, and the grain, etc.
Okay, okay, okay. Got it. So
So
I
they go,
believe
they go.
these three things will come. Not I can say these are independent buttons we will be having in camera, but when coming to the technical perspective, these three things are dependent. Dependent on the
Exactly.
overall.
Definitely.
Overall.
That is correct. Correct. That is 100% correct. They are
Okay.
three different dials that you have in the camera. At the same time, they are completely dependent on each other. They are very hard linked with each other.
Okay, okay. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you,
So,
Ramakan. Now, yeah,
uh,
I got it. Yeah.
yeah. No. So regarding the practical implications, right? So when choosing aperture, there is this method that we use, exposing to the right. So I'll just very briefly tell what this is. So we should always, it's better to overexpose the scene a bit, just a bit, so that in post-production, when it comes to video editing, you can naturally, dampen the lighting instead of shooting it up. What happens when you shoot it at a bright, a grainy environment, right? So what happens is that it may not look natural. So exposing to the right is that it's often better to overexpose your image, and you can control it with an ND filter. So what is an ND filter? We'll cover it tomorrow because we don't have time. But it's better to slightly overexpose your frame so that it looks bright, and it also helps you in your post production so that you don't have to artificially enhance the frame exposure. And of course, the low light limitation. For example, you are shooting in dark. In nighttime, if you are shooting outside, of course, there is no light. At that time, you only have one option, which is to shoot up your ISO. Because no matter how much open you keep your shutter or how much open you keep your aperture, there is no light only in the dark to enter into your lens. So only one option you have, and that is to artificially introduce the light through ISO. So in low light conditions, you only have one choice wherein you shoot up the ISO. Of course, you will get noise, but the latest Sony lenses and Sony bodies, they are coming with this low grain even in higher ISOs. So that's it. We can call it a day. I'll just briefly summarize whatever I told in 1 minute. So first thing, aperture. So aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, these three together are called as exposure triangle. And each of these can control your lighting independently. So if you have more aperture, more light will enter into the lens, which means that your images will look bright. And if the shutter speed is fast, where is that? If the shutter speed is fast, it means that the shutter is open for a very less amount of time, which makes the image dark. And what is that? And the ISO. So if you increase the ISO, the brightness will increase. Now, the side effects of them are, if you increase ISO, more grain will be added, that is more noise will be added. So you should always keep it below 1000. And coming to shutter speed, if you are shooting at 24 FPS, then you only have one choice. You should put the shutter at 1/50 because that gives you the natural motion. The hand movements and all will look very natural. And coming to aperture, you should always choose the lowest possible f-stop number. Okay, and so that's it. I'll just write it down. If anyone else do you like to volunteer to tell what should be the ideal values? Aperture. So aperture should always be the highest, so that in our case it is f4. Our lens supports only f4. So you should always put your aperture at highest so that it gives you the background blur effect. Okay. And the second thing is your shutter speed. So now how much should we put the shutter speed? Okay, before I say shutter, I'll put FPS. How much should we shoot our FPS at? It should always be at 24 FPS only because it gives you that natural, motion blur. Coming to shutter, it should always be 1/48 second, so that as per the 180-degree rule, right? 180-degree rule, and then comes our ISO. You should always choose a native ISO. Native ISO is nothing but lowest possible ISO. Lowest ISO. Your camera automatically, it has few features. Our camera, it shows you the native ISO at 100, at 125 and 800. You can choose any of them. So now the question here is very important question. Okay, you told that you asked me to put the aperture at the highest, which means very bright light is going to come. FPS is at 24, that is the shutter is at 1/48, which is moderate. Now you are telling to put the ISO at lowest possible. So it's going to make it dark. So usually this is balanced because your shutter is already at the medium, your aperture is at highest, your ISO is at the lowest. So one cancels out the other. So high aperture cancels out low ISO, and your shutter is already at the medium possible value. So it keeps it natural. So these three things, they're okay. Now they are balanced. But when it actually comes to frame, it's not the case. So you will notice that sometimes you need more lighting. Sometimes you have to make it a bit darker. So how do we do it? We should always keep the lighting under control. That is, you should choose your studio lights and you can alter the lighting, etc. And there are other parameters. For example, if all these three are fixed, then if I want to change the lighting, then how do I achieve it? Now everything is aperture is fixed, FPS is fixed, shutter is fixed, ISO is fixed. Now how do I vary the lighting? So we'll discuss that in the next session, where I'll tell you different things like white balance and exposure compensation, ND filters, etc. So we can alter those to fine tune the lighting that enters into our scene. So yeah, that's it for today. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. I'll try to answer.
So Ramakant, when there's a low lighting area, the
Hmm.
phase with low ISO. So I'm talking about low lighting indoor shooting, where
Hmm.
we do not have these uh, what do you say, the side lights, what you call them, the
Okay.
LED
Stud
lights,
Studio
whatever.
lights.
Studio lights, yeah. So
Okay.
without studio lights, when the area is dark with just tube lights around, then
Hmm.
we call it a low light area. And in
Correct.
that point, when we put low ISO, with a good camera, we get a clarity of it, but
No, no,
it'll be
no,
dark.
no, no, not less ISO. You should shoot up the ISO, right? To
So,
capture it. If you put low ISO, it will look even more darker. Let's say your room is your indoor room without studio lights. Let's say it is 60% dark. When you put
hmm,
low ISO, right, it will become 99% dark. You will not see anything. It will become very black. So you should shoot up the ISO. So when you shoot up the ISO, the grain that would be entered into the scene, but then the advanced cameras, for example, Sony FX3 or FX30, they have this mechanism wherein they try to reduce the grain while also maintaining more lighting in the scene.
okay, okay.
Hmm. So in low light, you should always go ahead with high ISO.
High
There will
ISO,
be
but that's a
uh,
little sacrifice of the clarity, right?
correct. That is definitely true. There is we cannot. So actually, in post production, there are tools which will help you reduce the noise digitally. That is possible. It'll make it look way better, but still you won't get the steady shot, perfect shot. You have to compromise on that.
Okay, so if comparing, suppose we have recorded with low ISO,
Okay.
uh, and the first option is in the post production, increase the lightening, brighten the video. The
No, that will
first
not
option,
happen. That will not work because when you shoot at
अरे,
low ISO,
uh-huh.
the no matter which tool you use, it doesn't understand. It doesn't make sense of the frame actually. What happens when you put at low ISO is scene will become very dark. It becomes black. So in pitch black, you cannot see anything. Your software also doesn't understand what's going on in the scene. So in post production should be used to reduce the grain. That is, in a low light scene, you should never choose low ISO in low lighting. Low ISO should be chosen only when you have proper lighting setup. If you don't have lighting setup, if you have a dark scene or a low light scene, your only choice is to record it using high ISO and you will see the scene very clearly, but lot of grain will be introduced. Good cameras will try to reduce the grain to some extent. In post production, you can take this video which has very high grain, and that post production tools will try to reduce this grain digitally. You should
Okay,
never shoot at low ISO in low lighting.
okay, okay.
Yeah. At the same time, in outdoor environments, you should not shoot at high exposure settings because what happens is that in outdoor environment, high exposure will make the entire scene too bright. You cannot even see what's going on. So no matter which tool you use, the tool cannot understand the subject or the background or the foreground. It doesn't understand anything because everything is bright. No matter what good post-production tool you use, you cannot fix the scene. At the same time, in low light scenarios, if you choose low ISO, that is low exposure, the scene will be completely black. So even in that case, no matter which tool you use, there is no point because because the grain is already at minimum. You can decrease the grain, you can increase the exposure or enhance the video brightness. It will make the black more brighter. It will make the black bit navy blue, but that's it. It doesn't understand the scene at all. So you should always do the opposite. When you're trying to shoot outdoors, right? So we should use ND filters. I'll tell that concept tomorrow. And indoors, right? If you're shooting low light, you should choose high ISO because that's the only choice you have. And then
Is
in
there
post
any
production, you can
option
decrease
there,
noise.
Ramakant, like apart from high and low, is there any another button called maybe medium ISO or something like that, or only two, just high and low? That's it.
Anna, for these three parameters, there is no high and low. So I told high and low so that we can understand it. So we have these dials, so wheels that we have. Let
Okay.
me quickly. So those wheels, right?
Mhm.
So you should. So it's always manual. You should adjust it till the decimals actually.
Okay, okay.
So
We need to adjust it. Okay.
uh, FX30 aperture dial. Let's say. So there are three dials. Okay. So here you're seeing one dial, right? So here this dial.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
this is one dial. Here there is second dial, and at the back, right, this fellow put his index finger. So there is third dial. There are three dials.
Okay.
Each dial controls each of these three parameters. So high and low, I told so that we can understand. It's always down to decimals. We should adjust it manually. So what values we should put these? F should be put at 4. FPS should be put at 24. Shutter should be put at 48 or 50. ISO
Okay.
is native. You can put it at 100 or 800.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. Got it, Ramakant. Yeah.
Right.
However, these values will be changing depending on the, room light on that particular day, right? Maybe today their lighting might be uh, low in that particular room, and tomorrow it might be dark. Sorry, it might be bright. So depending
Right.
on that, these values will be changing, right? It's not constant.
Uh, no, we should not do that because you should not touch any of these three. It is told that these three parameters can be used to change your exposure, which is true. But still, when you lock it at these three values, ideally one cancels out the other. The ISO and the aperture cancel out each other because aperture has more exposure. Low ISO has less exposure. They are canceling out. Your FPS
Okay.
at 24 and shutter at 1 by 50, it is already neutral. So your lighting and everything is ideal. It's very ideal. These settings. Now coming to your question, right? Now, what if the sun changes? Now, morning it's going to be at one temperature. Evening it's going to be different. Matter of fact, the shade itself changes. Some in the
Correct.
morning it will be somewhat blue. Maybe at 10 o'clock it will be red. It will become more orange color, and then it will become cooler in the evening. So if I'm
Yes.
shooting continuously, I cannot afford to change the shade, right? It looks unprofessional. I should not do that. And of course, as you told, it will affect the exposure also. So there is a concept called white balance, which I'll cover tomorrow.
Okay.
That solves the problem that you have asked. And coming to the actual question, right? So should we change it or not? So we should not change it for that reason only. We should, whenever you're shooting indoors, you should always keep the lighting under control. You should make the room very dark, and you should control the lighting only by your studio lights. Now your
Okay.
studio lights have two parameters. One is the percentage, and the other is temperature. So if you are shooting at 5000 Kelvin, it gives you cooler shade, and something more value gives you orange shade. Should always shoot at cooler shades. Like the most coolest shade is 5800 Kelvin temperature. So at this temperature, you can adjust your temperature percentage, brightness percentage, 100% or 85%. And the aim here is that you should never let the outdoor environment control your indoor exposure. You should always keep the rooms closed, okay, so that outside light does not enter, and you should keep the lighting under control by the studio lights so that you can adjust your studio lights as per your exposure settings that you have set in your camera. And regarding your question of what if the shade changes and you cannot make it completely dark, we'll cover that in the next session wherein I'll tell you about the white balance.
Got it, Ramakant. So that means maybe I can come to conclusion that as per my understanding, so the three values will be a constant, and if something changes, yeah, there is another feature or option which you are going to tell tomorrow.
Yes, correct. But
Okay.
that being told, that does not change the exposure or lighting values. the lighting has to be controlled by your studio lights only. And of course, there are other workarounds. I mean, what I told now, right, that you can control by a studio. Even that is not practically possible. You'll still see few limitations when you practically shoot the video. At that time, we can choose different video modes wherein you can keep, you have three parameters, right? You can keep two of them fixed and you can alter the last one. You can, that would be your ISO. So you can keep your ISO as flexible, that is in manual, and you can, adjust your ISO so that you can adjust your aperture as a whole. So that is a safe bet actually.
Okay, got it,
Mm.
Ramakant. Yeah.
So Ramakant, these two things are fixed. One thing is frame rate, which will be at 24 frames, and shutter speed, which is one by double of it, 41 by 48. These two are fixed. We are not
Aperture
going
is
to.
also fixed. Aperture is always fixed. You should not change it. Aperture should be at 4. 4 allows maximum amount of light.
Okay. Suppose if I go to an outdoor shooting under the
Okay.
sun where Swami
Mm.
is walking on the road or before the
Okay.
temple, standing before the temple. So at that point of time, I have to reduce my ISO because already the light is very bright,
Correct.
the sunlight,
That's true.
and
Yes.
also the aperture has to be reduced, isn't it?
Yes, that is true. I agree with that.
These
But
two things.
actually, aperture, what happens when you reduce aperture, right? So if you reduce aperture, the video kind of looks cluttered. So it will not give you that natural motion. You're talking, if in case if he's walking, right? At that
Hmm.
time, it's better to still keep your ISO at 4. There is other concept called as an ND filter. So that ND filter, you can attach it on top of your lens. So it will deliberately make the scene more brighter. So it is used in these outdoor environments. So
Now,
because people do not
okay.
want to change any of these settings, they
Uh,
always want the maximum aperture, they want motion blur with 180-degree shutter rule, and they also want low grain. At that point, they go ahead and buy ND filters. It is it's not costly. It comes around 2000 or something. It externally controls the light that enters into your lens.
So that means, Ramakant, so the
Mm.
first two items will be constant, and when coming to ISO, if we do internally low ISO, and if we do externally, it will be high ISO. Just only ISO needs to be changed, right? Depending of
Uh,
the indoor and or outdoor
uh,
environment.
No, in outdoor environment, you told ISO is high. In outdoor environment, ISO should be low. In
Oh,
indoor
sorry.
also, it should be low only. But then, if you think that the brightness is not sufficient, whatever settings I told will give the most natural look. But still, sometimes we feel that, okay, it can be a bit more bright. At that time, you can go ahead and alter the ISO. You can increase the ISO a bit so that you'll get a bit brighter scene. But when it comes to outdoor filters, right? ND filter, A and F concept. So whatever I told is actually applicable for indoor, outdoor, it doesn't matter which environment. You should always try to put at these values only. But if it comes to it, there is no other option for me. I have to alter it. You should alter ISO. In indoor environment, if you want more brightness, you increase ISO. In outdoor environment, anyway, you will keep the ISO at low. If you increase ISO, it will become even more bright. So ISO will be kept at low. We will not even touch the shutter. And the other thing is aperture. So aperture you can decrease actually. See from f4 you can make it f8. It will make the scene a bit darker. Okay, but then it will make the video will not look good. So there is this concept, and this is called as an ND filter. Consider it like eyeglasses, sunglasses, sunshades. So if you put sunshades to your eyes, what happens? The bright environment will become dark all of a sudden. So this will not make the video black. It will not make it. It will make it look natural only. But it has a dial here. So here one dial will be there. You can rotate it and you can control the brightness that enters into your environment. So outdoors, we should always use an ND filter. So here you are seeing both these, right? These pullas that you're
Yes.
seeing, these both. So those with that you can rotate it and you can control the excess lighting that is entering into your lens. So outdoors, we should always choose an ND filter. Indoors, if you would have no other choice, you have maxed out even your studio lighting, but still somehow you feel that this is not bright. At that time, you can manually change the ISO. There are many modes in our Sony camera. Whatever I told you till now is a manual way of shooting. Sony already has this native capturing, that is auto shoot, intelligent auto. Those are very good. So Trilokya, coming to your question, right? In outdoor environments, you can confidently use that setting. It will capture everything properly
Got it,
without
Even in the
understood.
high sunlight also, it will capture,
yes, yes, Sana, it will
Ramakant.
definitely
Okay.
capture. Yes, yes, it will definitely
Even in
capture.
the high
It will
sunlight.
capture.
Okay.
Yes, it will in high sunlight. It will capture beautifully. Even in low sunlight, it will try to even in dark environments, it will try to do as much as it can. But
Yeah.
as our requirements keep increasing more and more, as we understand the camera more and more, at one point you'll think that instead of a camera deciding all these things, I know all these things, so I'll be able to exactly get what I want. So once you attain mastery of all these things, then you can ignore the auto shoot and you can choose to dial in everything manually. So FX30 has many features for shooting videos in 4K. So it has Cine AI, it has log recording, S-Log 3 features, picture profiles. There are many more things which are yet to come. So in our next session, so I'll cover all of them there. Yeah, so so whatever I told are very basics, and what I told is not basics of videography. I told you the basics of photography, which is exactly applicable to videography also. So all the other things for in FX30, there are these many settings. There are way too many settings which you should understand in order to understand how to shoot a proper video. So I documented all those things regarding lenses as well. You have different shooting modes. So this is the intelligent auto mode. So so when you enable this, you can shoot the video. Your camera will decide everything automatically for you. And then you have video movie mode. So FX30 is flagship video mode, which tries to shoot the video in 4K in a cinematic way. And then there is S-Log 3. You have Cine Tone. You have Cine EI, log recordings, etc., etc. Many more things are yet to come. So we covered the bare minimum, the basics today. If you have any other doubts, I can take that up. In case I know, I will answer. If not, I'll try
One
to get the answer tomorrow.
one small request from my side, Ramakant, like whatever the document which you have showed today over the call,
Uh-huh.
is it possible like to share with us, so that maybe after your call, maybe in the afternoon or evening, just it would be I mean beneficial for us to go through the document, and if
Yes,
we
yes,
encounter any questions, yeah, however we have the recording, but for a quick thorough, it would be good like if you share that document till now,
yes,
whatever.
yes. Yeah. No. So I am making day-wise documents. So I made a master document wherein I'm documenting everything, but I'm also making day-wise documents, so that we'll have clarity on what happened today. So I'll share it in a group also. You can go through in your meantime. So we have set up the WhatsApp group for this reason only. So no matter which doubt you have, you can happily ask that in the group. I'll try to answer that. If I don't, then we can collectively try to find answer for that.
One important thing for all of us to note is whenever we use the camera for capturing satsanga, Swami's face has to be as fair as possible. So that is the measure that we need to achieve. So what do we need to achieve when we put camera and shoot satsang is main thing to look at. What is our goal is to capture the face of Swami in as fair as possible a manner. So that is the goal. It is
One
not about
very-
surrounding light or surrounding things or capturing anything else. Only just focus on Swami's face and adjust everything according to that. Yes or no?
yeah, got it. One, I mean, just to clarify from my side, Amma, like you just posted two pictures, right? With Swami, with one is with low SO and one is for high SO. But I mean, for my eyes, I see when coming to the fairness of the face, the low ISO, sorry, the high ISO is having uh, fairness, right, Amma? I mean, please correct me if I'm
Yes,
wrong. When
yes,
coming
yes,
to okay,
yes. But if
fairness,
you
Uh,
right?
observe that,
It is
there
very
is
fair.
there is no grain actually in this. I don't think this is high ISO because the
it is
grain is
digitally
minimal.
edited. It is digitally edited.
So digitally it adds color filters on top of these So the pixels, I mean, what I read is that I took this Sony master class wherein I learned all these things. So what happens when we digitally edit it, it actually reduces the ISO. So the whatever, so you posted this low ISO image, right? So
Yeah.
let's say that is the initial image that you have. So the second highest ISO image that you have, I assume that it is a processed image by some
Yeah,
software.
yes, it is processed one.
Ah, so it will actually reduce the ISO even more, but it will actually it will enhance the pixels, it seems. So whatever colors are there, I mean, each of the pixel would have a specific shade, right? So it enhances that specific shade, it seems, instead of shooting up the ISO. Now what happens? Yeah, exactly. It is high brightness. That is correct. So high ISO will make your frame look like a TV, dots, 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 dots. So simple measure is you will see dots everywhere, which means that ISO is high. If you are seeing it as high brightness, then you must have the software must have done it digitally to increase the brightness. It would have changed the color of each and every pixel that is there. Somewhat like that.
So
So
it is
digital
better to
solutions.
use low ISO, and then in the post production we can increase the brightness. So that way we will get the best of both, which means a brighter image and also high clarity.
Yeah, high clarity you'll definitely get. And like we discussed, right? Sometimes there is nothing you can do. Your only option would be to slightly increase ISO. But even if you increase the ISO, it's okay because just because you increase it minorly, all those dots will not come. So you can safely increase the ISO also. Anyway, in post production, that ISO will be removed, that minor ISO.
Yeah, I think 200 or something we can put, right? Not more than that, I guess.
Actually, you can put up to 800. Actually, 800 is also considered as a base ISO by FX30. So somewhat it
Uh-huh.
depends on the camera also. So it provides, I mean, it depends on the shooting mode. If you're shooting in movie mode, it considers base ISO, native ISO as 800. If you are choosing a different profile picture like a cinetone, it considers it as 800 only. But if you're shooting manual, right, then at that time, or even if you take other modes like aperture priority, shutter priority, in those modes, it will consider your base ISO or native ISO as 125. So it depends on the mode that you're shooting also. But
Okay.
in general, it's better to keep it as low as possible. So you'll be seeing the video in your monitor anyway, right? So better to keep it as low as possible.
Okay. Okay. So one thing I would like to tell is when we are there are two things. One, when we are making a recording of the video satsanga and doing post production and then releasing it. This is first scenario. Second
Hmm.
scenario is capturing the video and making it live instantaneously. So in these two things, in the first thing we can afford to shoot in low ISO and then do the post production, brighten it like how I posted in the picture, and then release it.
Hmm.
That is
Right.
good thing. We get the best of both. And in the
Hmm.
second scenario where we are going live instantly, is it possible to instantly increase the brightness in OBS and then map it live to YouTube?
OBS, I don't know much about OBS. Maybe Kishorana can answer that if that brightening, artificial brightening can be done in OBS or not. One thing that I know is that we have noise filters. So yesterday while we were trying to record, right, we were trying to do a live, me and Swatika. So we noticed that there was some noise. So when we enabled noise reduction, that filter in OBS, that noise that was coming from the AC was reduced. This noise part I am aware, what audio part, but
Okay,
video, if you
audio
can
noise
enhance
you're
that,
talking about. Okay.
I'm talking about audio noise. So video noise, I don't know if we can do it or not. Honestly, I don't know.
Okay, I
But
think
I'll
Kishore Anna, do you have any idea about this one? Anna might be busy or something. So we can discuss about with this with Kishore Anna, because
yeah,
we
sure.
want both, right? We always want both. Best clarity without any video noise, which means without any green, and we also want the brightness.
Hmm. So
Yeah. Yes.
brightness you can shoot up the ISO, right? It won't cause an issue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Issue. Yeah, I mean, your OBS, if it works, great. But if that's not possible, then we can definitely just increase ISO slightly. It will not cause any grain. So grain will come if you shoot more than 60,000, 35,000. At that level, grain will come. At 100, 150, 800,000, 2,000, grain won't come.
No, no, I think the highest is the 2000, I guess. Highest is
Highest
the
is
2000.
highest is 2,60,000.
260. In manual mode, is that so?
Yes. Actually, our lens yesterday I tested it. I was seeing 1,80,000 or something for us. So I shoot
Oh,
at both at 80,000. I shot it at 1 lakh. I shot it at 50,000, 40, 30,000, 10,000. I mean,
okay.
it lets you, right? So
Actually, I
I
used FX30 once. So that point of time, it was between 200 to 2000, if I'm not wrong. But
Ah,
2000
no,
was
no.
the
Okay, okay.
highest.
I understood. I understood what you said. So
Uh,
what you told is correct, but I see that's an advanced concept. So wherein you manually decide the hard limits of ISO while recording. You must have recorded it in movie mode. I'm sure of it. Only movie modes allows whatever you're trying to tell. So in movie mode, it there is a limit, minimum and a maximum ISO that can be set. So last time, like if you look at the live that I did, right, I have also set a hard limit on ISO because I don't want to cross it. For that reason, I was not able to increase ISO last time. So only a movie
okay.
mode allows you to set this minimum and a maximum ISO. I came to know it recently while I was shooting. So due to that, I'm sure that your maximum ISO at that point was set at 2000. So for that reason, I don't think there was nothing much you can do. So it's a concept.
Correct.
Yeah. So in manual, even in manual ISO, there is hard limits that you can set while shooting a video because people don't want to introduce unnecessary noise. Even in post production,
Right, right,
if
right,
one
right. We
frame
can't do anything.
you cannot do anything. There is no way out if you have noise.
Hmm.
And you have everything beautiful, just one single frame, even if it goes wrong, right? You can if you can cut the frame, but it looks like this fellow edited something, he's hiding something.
Right,
Especially
right.
during live events, we cannot afford that.
True, true.
So
The essence of buying more powerful cameras is to get the highest clarity. Then if we fail to do that and bring grain into it, then the benefit of using these high-end equipments will be lost.
yeah, it will be lost. And there is one more thing that I want to tell, yeah, just before we close. So here, I told, right? Where is that? Regarding the aperture. So one thing that I didn't tell you is the area doubles every time we change the f-stop. I must have, I thought of covering it in next session. So between f2 and f2.8, the brightness will be halved. You will get half the light from f2 to 2.8. Okay. And from f2.8 to f4, again the brightness will be halved. From f4 to f8, the brightness will be halved. So we are using an f4 lens, right? Which means you are getting only 25% of the lighting which you can get from an f2 lens. So, so for that reason, it's the best thing is to buy good lens actually, and we cannot afford a zoom lens with a good aperture.
Mm.
That's
Right,
beyond
right,
our budget. So there's
right.
only one way you can measure the distance from your camera and your speaker, and based on that distance, you can understand what would be the ideal focal, and you can use that focal and you can buy an f2 lens. It will cost around 25,000 maybe. That the Sony dealer that we know, he'll give it for less price only. I'm not telling we'll buy now. I'm telling that just talking about the
Yes,
future.
yes, yes,
At some
yes.
time in future, if you want to buy, we can buy a prime lens instead of a zoom lens.
Zoom lens.
Because
Correct, correct.
if you shoot with f2, you will have how much is it? 4, right? You'll have 200% more light.
Bah.
Because yeah, so one fourth, right? Only 25% of the light of what is captured by f2 enters into f4. So it's not the value here that matters. So between f2 and f2.8, there's 0.8 difference in f-stop. But the area, right? So the aperture area is almost doubling down. For the, I mean, it's becoming half. For that reason, the light also becomes half. So how does it become half and more we'll discuss in I'll tell you detailed next session. So this is the standard sequence. f8. There is also Sony released f 0.95 or 9598 also. So this is also there. From 9.8 to 1, right, the area becomes half. So half lighting is gone here. 1 to 1.4, another half light is gone. This to this, again half, again half, again half. So yeah,
Uh,
yeah, like
Ramakant,
that.
you had some two photos, right? In the document where you said the blurring also depth of field.
Depth of field, yeah, correct. Let me go there. Aperture. In aperture, depth of field, yeah, here.
Yes, yes, yes. Can you just zoom in? I just want again I got confused. Sorry for that.
Okay, no
In
problem.
this f1.4, the image
Hmm.
above that,
Hmm.
so can it is more aperture, right?
Yes, it is more aperture, correct.
Can you write over the picture there
Go more
above the
aperture,
picture?
more.
No, no,
Yeah, I wrote.
more aperture there, and above this second picture, write less aperture for visual memory. Yeah, more aperture,
Hmm.
and give some space.
Less aperture means it has more f1.
So,
So you
so if
can
you ask
consider
me,
one thing before I'll clarify this very clearly. What do I mean by more aperture? You can simply consider aperture as this opening. This opening. Consider aperture means this opening only. So here I'll clarify it again for you. More aperture. So here you have more area, right? Consider aperture as a hole. So more aperture means big hole, more hole. Of course, it has f1.4. So small f-stop number. Okay.
so
Now come to
in the
f16.
camera
Uh,
settings,
uh,
if you ask me, like if I'm on a call with you, okay, I'm
okay.
holding the camera, and you ask
Okay.
me, Trilokya, increase the aperture.
Uh,
So, like, how do I do it? Is there a button, or just moving that lens around?
no, no. So there is button actually. So look at this. Okay, I actually show you the original photo only. There are three dials. Okay. So here, look at this. So where is this? Four. Okay, that dial is not captured here. This one, right? So look at number four. Okay, label number four.
Ah,
Label number four. This is aperture. You control aperture
okay,
here.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
I mean, yeah, so aperture is controlled here. And then the second dial would, where would that be? So you have second dial here at number 6,
Mm,
right? So this number 6, this controls your ISO, okay?
okay,
And dial number 9 controls your shutter speed.
okay,
So three parameters have three different dial buttons so that you can adjust them.
okay. So if you ask me to increase the aperture, saying that this is dark, you increase the aperture, it will become bright, the frame will become bright. So I go to this number 4 part and move it clockwise or
Uh,
anti-clockwise. Are there numbers ingrained on it?
numbers are not ingrained. So if you move it to the left side, that is, if you make it anti-clockwise, then the aperture will increase. That is, the f number will come down and you will see brighter images.
Uh-huh.
అయినా నువ్వు ఒకసారి ట్రై చేస్తే నీకు అంత ఈజీగా అర్థమైపోతుంది.
Okay, okay,
ఒక 2-3
okay,
టైమ్స్ షూట్ చేస్తే అర్థమైపోతుంది.
okay. Got it,
ఎనీ
Ramakant.
మోర్
I'm
డౌట్స్?
good. Yeah.
ఓకే. అన్న అభిరామ్ అన్న, ఎవ్రీవన్ ఇన్ ద కాల్, ఎనీ అదర్ డౌట్స్? If no, then I think we can call it a day.
Yeah.
Uh, I'll share the documentation, and I'll also try to put a brief summary and a very brief summary of what we covered, so that tomorrow, in case if you have any other doubt, we can take that up as well, along with the new topics. Trilokya, I think at this pace, I need many more sessions actually. I thought I'll complete this in like 20 or 30 minutes, and last 15 minutes I thought we'll take doubts. but I think it took around 2 hours. I think I don't know.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
yes.
I maybe it will take at least six to seven sessions more to cover all the topics.
Yes, yes, we'll take time, no problem, Ramakant. Understanding is important. Let it take time. And one
Yeah.
kind request for you is please take this recording and release it on your own YouTube channel. And so
Okay.
that tomorrow, if anyone comes, right, so from your channel,
Uh,
you can just provide links to them.
okay, got it.